Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's Next Gen Morning Commute. Tomo, nice to see you again. How's your week been?
Yeah, good to see you as well, Joe. It's been great. I've had the week off. I decided I
Oh,
needed to decompress. It's been lovely. I've been in the lounge or sitting room, however you want to call that, and I've been in the garden. That was exciting. But I did go for my first socially distanced round of golf yesterday with my dad. That was great. I was terrible, but it doesn't matter because I got to go out for a lovely walk in the fresh air. But I'm here with you guys because I missed you all so much. I thought, you know what? What better thing to do on your leave than to dial in and speak to you all? But anyway, that's enough about me. Trust me, those who know me, I could do that all morning. So coming up, we have a show dedicated to well-being. We got Chris Bird and his well-being thought of the day. We got Kieran and Dan with Friday Wins, and we're also joined by Catherine Morgan and Ollie Smith for a breakfast table chat. But before we do all of that, we're going to go over to Ollie and the New Model Advisor news desk. How's it going, Ollie?
Yeah, good, thank you. Morning, everyone. Happy Friday. Just a few more hours before you can get in your cars and go for a 60-mile round trip to test your eyesight with no pressure of doing any work. What could be better? Sorry, I couldn't resist. National news on that front, as MPs from across the political spectrum urge Chancellor Rishi Sunak to extend support for the self-employed during the pandemic. There seems to be a little bit of an atmosphere, sort of shall we say, letting up some of the pressures and strains, but I think many MPs are concerned that it is not yet over for the self-employed. The government had given self-employed workers who qualify a grant of 80% of their average profits, up to £2,500 for 3 months. A similar scheme obviously exists for furloughed workers, but now a cross-party group of 114 MPs has signed a letter sent by Labour's Siobhan McDonough to Mr Sunak. The scheme is a lifeline, it says, for millions of lockdown workers right across the country. There are already significant holes in the support, but removing what is already in place would pull the safety net from under the feet of millions of self-employed workers. Astonishing even more, you might argue, that MPs can write. Story two, an interesting story from my colleague James this morning. So he's been looking at the FCA for a reporter to find out exactly what's been going on inside the regulator is quite impressive. His predecessors have always struggled, I would say, to kind of get an up-to-date sense of the FCA's sort of struggles day to day. But James has been finding out what's been going on with authorizations. He's sort of suggested in a piece that the FCA investigations and a spike in applications to join networks specifically may be causing current authorization cases to be delayed. In April, we revealed a huge increase in new advice firm authorization waiting times, and firms were waiting over 6 months per application in 2019 because of greater FCA scrutiny and investigations into things like phoenixing, as well as the ongoing market-wide probe into defined benefit transfer advice. But with the pandemic, it appears to have gotten slightly worse. We understand that the FCA is dealing with a spike in appointed representative applications it received between November and December last year, and this is now delaying some firms joining networks or other businesses as an AR. One network has spoken to us and told us that cases where an AR had to apply for control functions and then be approved were taking more than 10 times longer than usual. The network said it had to wait weeks for an FCA case officer to be appointed to its work, and cases were only dealt with after the network directly contacted the regulator's head of authorizations. Check out that story on the site and in your email inboxes when it lands shortly. Just on the topic of NMA, do look out for our next special edition of the magazine, which lands on your doorsteps on Monday. The team has spent many hours on international calls at frankly ungodly hours, speaking to representatives from the Financial Planning Standards Boards across the world in 8 different countries. The result is I have to say, fascinating take on the struggles and success and of bringing people together across different jurisdictions and regulatory structures. A huge well done to team actually for sticking with that and getting it over the line in such difficult circumstances. Is not easy to publish this stuff, but we wouldn't have been able to do it without Will and his kind of inspirational leadership there. And finally, a tale that I hope will warm your heart from a local perspective. An 11-year-old boy from Nottinghamshire has been inspired by the exploits of Captain Tom Moore to run a marathon raising more than £16,000 for charity. but there is a twist. Ted Hardstaff is blind as a result of Stickler syndrome, which left him with detached retinas and the inability to see at age 2. Ted's exploits have attracted the attention of celebrity sporting legends like Tour de France winner Geraint Thomas, as well as pundit Claire Balding and astronaut Tim Peake, who have all sent video messages of support to him. Check out the full video of him finishing the marathon on the BBC website. I have to say, it's quite an emotional watch, actually. What an inspiring little boy. And I think if we were all a little bit more like him, perhaps the world would be a better place. That's my thought for the day and news too. Anything you want to share with us, do get in touch with me or the team at news@citywire.co.uk.
Brilliant, Ollie. That really is inspirational stuff. Almost as inspirational as your head shaving exploits. So it's I've just been pointed in the direction of Ollie's sponsored shave of my head.
Yes.
There is a link in the chat box. Do you want to give us a bit more information on that?
Yeah, so two things really. First of all, the last time I'll find you the picture actually. 1 second. Sorry about that. I can't actually technically walk, but I managed to do that. That's what I used to look like when I was 16. Some may liken it to a sort of Brian May hair misdemeanor. I think it was cool at the time. You may disagree. But my hair has become increasingly long. I'm sure many people are in the same boat, unless they're Adam, in the pandemic. And I've decided to get rid of it, but do something good off the back of it. So I'm doing a sponsored hair shave tomorrow to take it all off again. So it will be the other end of the extreme from when I was 16. It's taken, maybe over 18 years to get. I can't do maths. But we're raising money for Mind, the mental health charity, which is hugely close to my heart. I've raised a bit of money for them before, and they have an emergency pandemic appeal, which is really, really important. So I just need £2 donations. That's all, nothing big. I originally set out to raise £50, but someone pledged 50 quid if I kept my moustache until the end of the year. And naturally, like an absolute muppet, I agreed to it. And I'm already regretting it less than 24 hours later. So yeah, that's the deal. Any sort of beer tokens you can throw towards that would be hugely appreciated.
Good man. I'm not sure how I'm going to recover after seeing that picture of you at 16.
Shocking, isn't it?
But no, that's brilliant. That is brilliant. I just, I hope once you do shave it, it has an opportunity to grow back. Otherwise, you may have just taken the mickey out of Adam O, but that may be your life. But anyway, moving swiftly on. Thanks for that, Ollie. Joe, what have you got for us next?
So next we have Chris Budd's financial well-being thought for the day, obviously an important topic every week, but has a particular relevance for today's show. Chris, what have you got for us?
Morning, Joe. All I'm saying is not everybody needs to be paid to shave their head, Ollie. I just want to share a quick story. There's a couple of people that I saw a few years ago, the two business owners, half and half owned the business, 50-50. And we were talking about what they needed to sell the business for. And they had a figure of 6 million in mind, 3 million each. And I just started to ask a few questions about where that number came from. It'd be very easy just to have started a financial plan towards those numbers. But I was curious. 3 million is a very round number, always suspicious of round numbers. And one explained that he wanted to use the money to be an investor into other businesses, but the other guy said he wanted to emigrate to Australia with his wife. That was his wife was Australian, and they had 3 children. The eldest one was 9, and they wanted to emigrate so that they could go to school in Australia. Now, the 6 million figure was in 5 years' time, so it was a 5-year plan, and at the end of that, sell at 6 million. And I just wasn't happy that all of this still equated to this figure of 3 million each. So eventually they kind of got down to it and admitted that the reason that they had 3 million each in their heads is because that's what one of their friends had sold his business for. And when I went back to the guy who wanted to emigrate to Australia, I said, well, excuse me, if you could work out that maybe, 2 million was enough, and you could get that in 3 years' time, then your son could go to school at 11 at the senior school at the right time. So the message of that whole story is really have your own motivations, have your own purposes, not somebody else's. That was a really good example of an extrinsic motivation brought in by somebody else, not by their own purpose. So help your clients to find their own motivations and don't use other people's.
Lovely. Great reminder. Thanks very much, Chris. Next, Tomo, what have we got?
We have Hiran and Dan, and they've got Friday wins for us. Guys, take it away.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Hope we're all okay. We thought we'd just bring you some news to try and cheer you up. Can you hear me okay, Tom? You're giving me a very confused look there.
This is my resting beef face, as they say. I won't use the actual word on here. No, you carry on. I've not frozen.
Hang on a second. I'm just going to share my screen. Hiran is here as well somewhere.
Good morning, Dan. Good morning, all.
There he is. There he is. Yeah, so we just thought we'd bring you some good news. We'll try and battle through this as fast as we can. So, Hiran, do you want to take it away, mate?
Oh, God.
Thanks, Dan. First one here is Tom Morrison Schultz from last week's cocktail evening. And true to form, Tom has found a way of getting 50% off suits, which is fantastic. So, well done, Tom, for looking the part, waist up. And I believe it was a great evening during the course of the night as well, from all the sort of slack winds we saw from there. Back to you, Dan.
Thanks, mate. Yeah, we've got this great story from Gareth Thompson, who's been a member for quite a while now, who his stepmom, who had COVID, was released from hospital last week. Now, she had COVID originally, and then she was also found to have partial heart failure as well, which isn't great, obviously, but she pulled through, and she's heading home at last. So she headed home last week. So it's great news. And I think everyone needs a bit of good news, and seeing that people can pull through this at the moment as well.
Thanks, Dan. And sticking with that great news, we have another Dan, Martin this time, who has been sticking with the profession for 3 years. And we're so lucky as a sort of profession to have not lost him out to programs such as Love Island. So it's been fantastic to have him on board and hopefully here for a long time. Back to you, Dan.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, and our final one from the Next Gen Planners community last week was this gorgeous picture from Next Gen member Simon Dendel. Now, obviously, it's a bit of a weird world that he's born into at the moment, but with a dad like Simon and with lockdown hopefully easing very soon as well, it might be actually a better world that he's born into. So all the best, Simon, and he's absolutely gorgeous. So we'll move on to global ones now. Hiran, what do we have in the global wins this week, mate?
This morning we have a sort of fantastic news with regards to, again, how wildlife has been thriving during our lockdown without sort of the air pollution and various sort of distractions that they may have usually had. So firstly, we have a friendlier world for bees. So the lower pollution and human disturbance and traffic has given the chance for wild bees to thrive. Bees are rapidly declining around the world, but are very important to life. Bees are the world's most important pollinators and fertilize a third of the food we eat, 80% of flowering plants. So actually a study done by University of Reading said they add 120 billion to the UK economy for every year. So effectively, this is great news to see them thriving.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it is good news. Yeah, I think we've all been doing this recently, but there's a company, I think a lot of you have probably heard of them, called Campaign for Real Ale. They're in for quite a few pubs around the UK. They've launched this thing called the Red on Lion. Now it's a virtual pub, which again, I mean, it's nothing special. But the special thing about this is that they had 1,400 people on there in their first opening weekend. So at any one time in that first opening weekend, they had 1,400 people on there. You can book tables, you can play pub games, you can catch up with your friends over a beer. I think a few people on here might have even been on there. Now, I'll put the link in the chat. Like I said, it's nothing special. Everyone can do this on Zoom and stuff like that. But the great thing about this is it's so broad, so you can just meet loads of different people from all over, and it feels like an actual pub as well. But the last one for today.
Thanks, Dan. It's a great story. Effectively, probably the best beer in the world. A Netherlands-based company called Avantim has partnered with Coca-Cola and Carlsberg with a promising new biodegradable bottle. This is durable enough to contain carbonated drinks. But the really good news is that when we put it into a composter, the bottle biodegrades in just 1 year. So it takes no fossil fuels to create and can be recycled too. It has been called plant plastic, and there is a massive amount of investing behind it. In fact, Lego have actually promised to move towards plant plastic by the year 2030, and currently all new Lego are built with this plastic. So a bit of fun fact there for you. Thank you.
Yeah, and with the show's coming to an end, obviously, very soon. So that's us for today. But what we'll do is, after the show in the Morning Commute Slack channel, we'll put all the places that we get this good news from. So when we're not here to give you the good news, you can go on all these different websites and you can find it for yourselves as well. But we'll pass back to Joe and Tom. But thanks very much, guys, and have a nice weekend.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Kieran. Thanks, Dan. Much needed injection of positivity before the weekend. So that was great. Next, we have our well-being breakfast table chat with Catherine, Ollie, Chris, and Tomo. So please get your questions in on the chat. Tomo, over to you.
Yes, I have the dubious honour of trying to chair this discussion, but we got three great talkers on the subject. Let's start off by asking each of you what you've been doing to maintain your well-being during this period. So let's start with Catherine.
So I'm just finishing my mouthful of breakfast. It really is a virtual breakfast morning, I tell you. It's a really good question. Actually, I was thinking about this last night. What have I been doing to support my well-being? I'll be really honest with you. I sometimes struggle with this. I don't know if anybody else feels the same, but I find it much easier to take care of everybody else before I take care of myself. But I have been, I actually, there's a really great website and an app that I've been using over the last 3 weeks, and it's called Action for Happiness. I don't know if any of you have come across it. They have a great Facebook group, and they often do these calendars throughout the year. And they've got tons of happiness facts on their website, which are really interesting. I'll just share a couple with you, actually. Did you know that happiness is contagious? And statistically, research shows that the happiness of a close contact increases the chance of being happy by 15%. If that's any reason to get people out of social distancing, I don't know what is. The happiness of a second degree contact, i.e. a friend's spouse, increases your happiness by 10%. And the happiness of a third degree contact, like a friend of a friend of a friend, by 6%. So there you go. Surround yourself with happy people, which has been tough, right? Because we haven't really had as much choice as to who we surround ourselves with over the last few weeks. But I feel really fortunate that, you know, I've got a great husband and my 2 kids, and I've just really spent as much time with my children as possible. My youngest has learned how to ride his bike for the first time. He's eaten 3 more vegetables than he's ever eaten in his life. We're just really being grateful for some of the little things that I would never have, you know, we never would have had that time together had they been at school. So I'm actually quite enjoyed having them at home. I never thought I'd say that. I love my kids dearly, but I never thought I'd say that. So actually our happiness time is every single day between 3 and 4 o'clock, we go for a family walk. And that's our happy time. And obviously the weather's been on our side. It's been lovely. And this week as well, Tomo, you were saying about meeting up with your dad for a game of golf. I saw my mum for the first time yesterday, which was lovely. And we walked around the lake together, feeding the ducks and the geese and stuff with the kids. So yeah, that's kind of what I've been doing really to keep myself feeling positive and as optimistic as we all can, really.
Brilliant. Thanks, Catherine. Chris?
Well, I have struggled on occasion. The business I spent 2 years trying to set up, helping companies to succession plan, has just paused, because who's thinking about that at the moment if you own a business? But what I've done is I've just kept reminding myself what my purpose is, what my intrinsic motivation is. And it's the good thing about this is enabled me to spend a lot of time on the IFW and giving it a big shove in lots of places where maybe it needed a bit of a shove. And that has given me huge enjoyment, and the amount of energy and interest I'm getting back is just extraordinary. So that's enabled me to kind of refocus on what makes me happy and proud and gives me well-being.
Nice one. Nice one. Ollie?
Yeah, this is a really interesting question. I mean, I was doing a lot of exercise, but I injured myself last week, so that's sort of very recently gone out of the window. And I actually found in the last couple of days, I've really taken to listening to music, I would say in inverted commas, properly, as opposed to just sticking a song on, you know, the Alexa or whatever. I've just been sort of lying on my bed with my earphones in, properly listening to it and kind of analysing it, really. A bit of a music kind of production nerd in some ways. I finally bit the bullet on Dan Graham's nudge to finally listen to the new 1975 album, because I was so scared that it would be rubbish because they've just been doing too many drugs. and it's brilliant. It really is. It's a fantastic piece of music. I think one thing I would add is before lockdown, I've been seeing a therapist for just under a year, and there was definitely a sense that I was kind of rushing from work at sort of 6:30 on a Wednesday to try and get to the sessions, and kind of arriving, rain or shine, either dripping wet or boiling hot, and sort of struggling maybe to be in the right headspace for it at times. But during the actual lockdown, I've probably derived more value from it than I ever thought I would. We've been doing it over Zoom, which is obviously a replacement for the face-to-face element, but I found it so useful, and it's been a real kind of pillar in my week to kind of reflect on my own purpose and what I want to achieve. And that's been a reminder of kind of, I suppose, the hope side of things, that even with everything in disarray and a lot of chaos, that there's still sort of targets you can set yourself, and there's still stuff that you can do. So I think I found that really nice.
Yeah.
There's a theme, Tom, isn't there? If I can just jump in.
Yeah, you jump in.
Of slowing down, and that's, I've had space to think because I've had to slow down, and that's surely a message that modern life isn't conducive to well-being.
Yeah, 100%. I totally agree with that. I think there was a sense, like when we're in the office, some of you may commute to work. Commuting to work for me was never that much of an issue because I lived quite close to the office, but I think that proximity just made everything a kind of mad dash, because it was like, well, because I live so close, I can just cram as much stuff into the day as possible. And slowing down has meant that I could really plan when I exert myself, so I can really say, okay, well, this is the point in the day where I'm really going to go for it, and this is the point in the day where I'm actually going to relax a bit. And so that's been a very welcome shift, I think, in the dynamic of daily life.
Yeah, it's a really good point. One of the I'm studying a US program at the moment, and one of the things that the trainer does is every 20 minutes she has this chime that goes off in the background, and it's a bit distracting actually. But she kind of says that she uses that chime as a prompt, so like a reminder to just slow down and breathe. And I thought that was really interesting. I've been using the Calm app as well, actually, since lockdown, which I've never used before. So every night before I go to bed, I put an alarm clock on for 10 minutes on one of my favorite tracks on there. And I just kind of listen to that as I'm drifting off to sleep. And that's definitely really helped. It's helped my quality of sleep to really improve.
It's interesting what you said as well, Catherine, about how affected we are by other people's emotions and other people's happiness. My girlfriend has been using that app, and she initially started sort of listening to it on earphones in bed before we go to sleep. And then she started listening to it without earphones on because she was kind of falling asleep quite nicely and quite peacefully. And at first I was sort of like, oh, I've got to listen to this. I just want to read my book about, the Peloponnesian War. But it's sort of hugely beneficial, even if I don't use that app, just to sort of know that she's sort of like drifting off and just as kind of peaceful and calm. That's actually made a huge difference to my well-being at the end of the day. Because I have this weird thing that she has a go at me about when we wake up in the morning. So on the weekend, I get quite panicky if I've not gotten up by a certain time and I'm not productive, I'm not doing something. I get panicky because I think, oh, she's mad, I've stayed in bed, blah blah blah. So if I oversleep, even though there's no like prior agreement of what we're actually doing, it sort of sets me off a little bit. But that's been kind of hugely useful to know that in the mornings, like, she's just fine doing her own thing. She's painting in the living room, watching some god awful episode of Grey's Anatomy where all the doctors are sleeping with each other in what's meant to be a clinically clean treatment area. I found that really, really useful to focus on my kind of, shall we say, sensitivity to others, and maybe to try and exploit that a little bit for my own well-being.
Yeah,
Can I jump in a second here, guys?
Go for it, Tom.
I got a train of thought, and by the way, ER is the one, not Grey's Anatomy, if you're into that sort of thing. Touching on Catherine's point about sort of social interactions having a real boost to our well-being, there's tons of research that is definitely key, definitely massively key, and we're obviously all missing it. I'm going to make a statement, and then I've got a question, okay? It's a bit journalistic of me at the moment, isn't it? That seems to be the thing. I'm finding personally Twitter is a place where I can get social interactions. And it was positive. However, that has turned rather negative over the past few days. Have you got any advice on how to cancel out that noise or any noise in general?
I'll chip in on this because I totally feel you on that. And it seems to me that, you know, you're used to sort of looking at graphs about, you know, volatility or whatever. I think, you know, Twitter has lovely moments and it makes me laugh a lot. Like I remember doing a social media detox a few years ago where I just thought, oh, I need to get rid of all these things, and I deleted Twitter off my phone among other kind of apps and stuff like Facebook. And I actually really miss Twitter because it makes me howl with laughter when I see some of the stuff, and that does make a huge difference to my life because I love to laugh. And nevertheless, there's sort of this sense that despite whatever upside, there's like a continual and perpetual downside that's sort of getting a bit worse. And I think that is probably true. It's becoming a little bit worse like every 6 months in terms of sort of dialectic cesspit. And I think that's made me very cautious and careful about like what I read actually. And being the sensitive type, I tend to sort of get quite sort of upset and angry about various things that I see and oh, that's ridiculous. And there is an element of personal choice there. I mean, just to say like, I don't have to engage with this if I don't want to. Equally, I think it is really, really important to turn all that stuff off before you go to bed.
Can I put an alternative view?
Yeah, go for
it. Because I think social engagement is the biggest contributor to well-being. I've been working from this cabin for 2 years now, and I love Twitter, but there is negativity. But there's negativity in the world. There are dickheads out there, and there's quite a lot of them. But they are a minority. And my Twitter experience hugely improved when I I muted 5 particular people. They were all IFAs. If I said who they are, you'd all nod and say, oh yeah, that one. The guys that jump in and just are really, really negative and miserable. And I'm not going to name them now. Well, I will privately if you want to. But once I got rid of them out of my timeline, it all cheered up.
Yeah.
And I started to enjoy it again. But not everyone's on Twitter. The same goes for Facebook. I went on my wife's Facebook. I'm not on it personally. God, some of the whinging of the people in our village. My God, they got nothing better to do. So I just don't look at it. It's a choice. You can choose who you follow and who you don't follow. So choose the people that make you happy. Don't follow the people that don't. So the idea that that Twitter is a negative place, I think, is a daft idea because it's your choice who you follow.
Yeah,
that's interesting. An observation on you, Chris. I saw with all the DC, the man whose name shall not be named. You were really quite laid back by it, and was it a when I say laid back, you had your own opinions on this, and I think I know where they are. But was it a conscious choice not to wade in? Was that for your own benefit?
I had a couple of bits of fun with a couple of people, but yeah, look, what difference is my opinion going to make? I've got some views on it. I like to offer an opinion where I think people might engage with it, but I don't like hectoring. So what's the point of me just going on Twitter like other people are already doing? There's plenty of people more intelligent than me doing that. I don't need, it doesn't need me to be shouting. I'll happily engage and have an opinion, but hectoring's boring.
I think that's it, isn't it? It's how you choose to respond to something sometimes that's also in your control. You know, so you can mute people, but also how you choose to respond is really important. There's a really great film. Have you guys seen, what's his name? Tom Hanks. The film's just been released on iTunes, A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. Have you guys seen that?
I have not.
It's so good. I mean, it talks more about forgiveness, actually, but there's a real pivotal point in the movie where he coffee shop and then he pauses and the whole of the coffee shop pauses with him. And I've never seen that in a movie. I've never seen it where they literally have 2 minutes of complete silence and you're sitting there thinking as someone who's watching it. It's really powerful, but it just really kind of re-emphasizes about life and how we have choice and how it's definitely one to watch. It's very reflective.
One thing I'd throw in just on like the positivity of social media is I've had a really fun time meeting lots of different people on Instagram. Um, I've never met them face to face. There's a couple of people from the world of music and guitar that I've kind of started chatting to. There's someone from the world of fitness. I've had some great chats with Chloe in the past few days. Like it's been really nice to get to know people, and it's kind of it was kind of a back to basics thing, I'd say, about just enjoying that process of getting to know someone. You know, and you can still do it. Doesn't You don't have to do it over a pint in the pub. It's just been really pleasant.
So can I just tie this together a little bit, if that's all right, Tom? I don't wish to
Yeah,
do
you carry on.
for you, but there's the message here, which is take back control, isn't it, of your own lives. Finding a bit of space, getting off the treadmill, gave us some breathing space, gave us some slowing down time. Follow the people you want to follow on Twitter. It's your choice. You don't have to have a negative time. The well-being comes from knowing yourself, that know thyself thing that we talk about in financial well-being all the time. So well-being comes from know thyself. Take control of your life and choose what you do, and choose the things that make you happy. Don't do the things that make you unhappy. Doesn't sound too complicated.
No, I always try and remind myself what well-being means, and it's quite a vague word for a lot of people. So always try and remind you, from what I can see, it's the state of being comfortable, healthy, and happy. Now, the healthy and happy bit gets focused on a lot, but the comfortable, maybe there's an element of having control. You know, I certainly feel more comfortable when I'm in control. We can't control everything. So that's a really interesting point, Chris. And the healthy and happy, obviously we touched on how to make ourselves happy. Healthier, I don't know, lockdown. I wouldn't say necessarily everyone's diet's as good as it once was, but running for me has been something that I was doing before lockdown, and it certainly helped me during it, just to get out in the initial phases. So I think you're spot on, Chris.
And Claire makes a fabulous point, of course, which is what we're all here for, which is you need somebody else sometimes to take you out of that situation and make you realise you're doing things that are making you unhappy and unhealthy. And so the financial coaching that Catherine does, and what financial advisors' role is for, is to help people to reflect on their own lives, maybe challenge on the odd occasion, so that they can realise they're doing things that are making themselves unhappy.
We don't screenshot this much or sort of advertise it because it's largely private, but I have a really nice WhatsApp group with Rohan and Steve Nelson at the Lancat that kind of kicked off because of the mental health campaigning we were doing as a publication last year. And I view that group, I mean, it's a wonderfully equal group in which, you know, no one really dominates it, which I like. You know, it's not just me sounding off about how many errors I've made that day. It's a really nice balanced place in which blokes, and you know, without being unfeminist, because I don't believe that men bear the majority of the problems of the world, blokes who struggle traditionally to talk about their own feelings can just kind of be honest with each other about what's going on in their lives, and that's been absolutely fantastic for us. And the number of times that Rohan has, you know, not waded in to just sort of say do this, do that, but just to say what can you do to help yourself at this point, you know, what, and be the sort of inspiration rather than the dictator. That for me nails it. I mean, he's a great kind of coach in that sense, I'd say. It's been really useful.
Chris has got a fantastic exercise for this to try and help yourself with this coaching. Chris, you know which one I'm talking about?
I don't actually. Is it not the
well,
evidence?
it's the ask questions and you're not allowed to give any answers exercise.
Yeah.
And even just try it with your friends down the pub when they've got a problem. Your one sole objective is to, well, there's a couple. A, don't talk about yourself, and B, only respond with questions.
Yeah.
And also, there's three. The third one is you're not allowed to offer solutions. So just see how long you can go having a conversation with somebody with those three rules. Only asking questions, not mention yourself, only offer solutions. Don't offer solutions. In my experience, I've done this thousands of times with people, and the first time they do it, it's less than 40 seconds on average they can keep that going for.
We
That's
did an
really
exercise. Sorry.
No, go on, Ollie.
We did some mental health first aid training at work in January, and one of the hardest exercises we did was basically the trainer split the room into two groups of people, took the first group outside and left the second group in the room. And she went outside to the first group and said, you guys are the talkers. You're going to go in there and find your partner and talk to them about, what a problem that you've encountered in the last sort of week or so. And, I'm going to go and tell them that they have to be absolutely brilliant at listening to you and to follow those rules. Now, what she actually did was leave that first group outside, come into the second group inside and say, I want you, against all instincts, to ignore them and to be the rudest possible people to these poor talkers, and just see what happens. And it's a really interesting behavioral experiment because it exposes that there are 2 or 3 different types of people in that scenario when they're not being listened to. There's people who will belligerently stop and ask questions about why they're not being listened to. There's people who will be sort of more tentatively guilty and will ask themselves and basically say to themselves it's their fault. Or there's people who will just carry on because it's so awkward. And the idea of the exercise is just to see what the social dynamic is in the room and to identify like what each person's behavioral bias is basically in that situation. And then when it comes to the actual thing in real life, to kind of overcome it with the actual way of doing it, as Chris says, which is to kind of listen without judgment, making yourself the center of attention, or, endless solutions. And it was a really, I don't think you can really do it on Zoom, but it was a really, really interesting exercise to do.
I was just going to say, interesting that we're talking about this because that's the homework that I've set my financial coaching cohort literally yesterday, last night, was to demonstrate the power of listening to a client's language and the emotion. Because Chris is right, often we like talking about ourselves, don't we? And so how often do we get into conversations where we ask a question, like, where are you going on holiday this year? And then the person you're talking to will say, oh, I'm off to, I'm hoping I'm going to go to Greece. And then we automatically start saying, oh, I've been to Greece before and I've been here and there. And we, because we like the interaction, but often we're in such a hurry to talk, or we don't slow down and actually spend time listening. And actually, one of the things I just wanted to finish off with from my perspective before I need to shoot off is Chris was saying about, and Chris and Tom were saying about control. I think the language that we use with ourselves is one of the most important things to be aware of, to bring some curiosity to, because for me, I actually don't connect with the word control at all. So if someone said to me, getting control, that makes me feel quite anxious. And so I think sometimes being aware or conscious of what language is positive for you and what language is negative for you. I think I've got specific reasons why I don't like the word control. But for me, I actually seek happiness through any possible ways that are not controlling. So like going down to the sea is really serene for me because it's about space and freedom. There's no control. There's no control over the waves. And that brings me happiness. So I think sometimes the words that we use is just interesting to bring some curiosity to your language.
Joe, I think you've made a fascinating point, and thank you for challenging us both on that. And it's important. One thing that we have to be wary of with clients, if we're talking about now helping clients in this space, is not paraphrasing, not using our own language. And I would imagine a good open discussion, quite a few of those words that you just talked about would come out. And it's about exploring the words that are actually said, not the words the way that you would put them personally, because it's their worldview, if that makes sense to you.
Yes.
So you're spot on.
It's reflective language, isn't it? So if you're unsure or want to clarify how they feel, you can just repeat back to them, which is what the homework is I've given to my cohort, is to ask a question, listen to what they have to say, and then just repeat back. And what that also does is it shows that you're really listening and they feel heard. So that's another way of just kind of being insightful into how that person's feeling. It's a bit like that nail in the head video that I shared right at the start of this morning commute. Sometimes people just want to be listened to. They don't actually need any solutions at all. They know the solutions themselves. And that's why, like, going to a therapist, like with Ollie, for example, they're there to listen. And it's, it's so powerful, isn't it? Just to be able to have that space to have a conversation.
And in listening, you empower that other person so that when they do eventually achieve or crack that issue or just make some progress towards cracking it, the achievement's all theirs. It's and that's a kind of intangible thing, but you feel that when you achieve something because someone's helped you to, rather than someone's just sort of dictated what the answer is. You do feel differently. You feel like you've nailed it yourself, as opposed to just being at the behest of someone else.
Teach somebody to fish, and they will eat every day. Isn't that the famous?
Absolutely.
Parable? I'm just going to wrap things up, if you don't mind, because we've gone over, but people have been very kind to stay on. Chris, you're curating the financial wellbeing CPD stream for the conference. What is that going to look like?
Well, we've got 7 slots to fill, so I thought I'd do them all.
Perfect.
No, obviously not. So we've got, I can't remember the exact people, but we've got people like Mark Bristow's going to do stuff about self-limiting beliefs, for example. I am going to do a slot about what actually is financial well-being, because it's all great and wonderful for us to talk about this stuff, but what you actually do. How does advisor use this in their daily grind? That's when they're sitting with the client. I think that's really, really important as well. So we're going to have bits of that as well. Some mental well-being stuff. Yeah, lots of interesting things.
Brilliant. So hopefully we'll be able to delve into some of more of the topics that we talked about today. I am going to wrap things up now, just because we are over and people have got their days to go on. Catherine, Ollie, and Chris, thank you so much for your for getting involved and being so open, and providing what I hope is some really useful tips for us personally, and also the clients that we serve. Ultimately, that is what we're how we're trying to better the world, is trying to better our clients' experiences. So thank you for that. Joe?
So next week, it is actually our last week of live shows, at least for the time being. So we are bringing as many of our regular contributors back as possible for a celebration of the Morning Commute and the Next Gen Planners community. So tune in, everyone, from Monday at 8:30. Stay safe, everyone. Bye.
Here's Joe. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.